We're going to start today with a story you probably know.
The story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time, there was a little girl named Goldilocks. She went for a walk in the forest. Pretty soon, she came upon a house. She knocked, and when no one answered, she walked right in. At the table in the kitchen, there were 3 bowls of porridge. Goldilocks was hungry. She tasted the porridge from the first bowl. "This porridge is too hot," she exclaimed. So she tasted the porridge from the second bowl. "This porridge is too cold," she said. So she tasted the last bowl of porridge. "Ah, this porridge is just right," she said happily, and she ate it all up. After she'd eaten the 3 bears' breakfasts, she decided she was feeling a little tired. So she walked into the living room, where she saw 3 chairs. Goldilocks sat in the first chair to rest her feet. "This chair is too big," she exclaimed. So she sat in the second chair. "This chair is too big too," she whined. So she tried the last and smallest chair. "Ah, this chair is just right," she sighed. But just as she settled down into the chair to rest, it broke into pieces. Goldilocks was very tired by this time, so she went upstairs to the bedroom. She lay down in the first bed, but it was too hard. Then she lay in the second bed, but it was too soft. Then she lay down in the third bed, and it was just right. Goldilocks fell asleep.
Now, I'm guessing that you know the story well enough that you know I stopped it too soon. This story is not done. And I'm guessing many of you remember what happens next. So here's the rest of the story.
As she was sleeping, the 3 bears came home. "Someone's been eating my porridge," growled Papa Bear. "Someone's been eating my porridge," said the Mama Bear. "Someone's been eating my porridge, and they ate it all up," cried the Baby Bear. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," growled the Papa Bear. "Someone's been sitting in my chair," said the Mama Bear. "Someone's been sitting in my chair, and they've broken it all to pieces," cried the Baby Bear. They decided to look around some more, and when they got upstairs to the bedroom, Papa Bear growled, "Someone's been sleeping in my bed." "Someone's been sleeping in my bed too," said the Mama Bear. "Someone's been sleeping in my bed, and she's still there," exclaimed Baby Bear. Just then, Goldilocks woke up and saw the 3 bears. She screamed, "Help!" and she jumped up and ran out of the room. Goldilocks ran down the stairs, opened the door, and ran away into the forest. And she never returned to the home of the 3 bears. The end.
All right, so Goldilocks and the 3 bears isn't the most epic of stories. There's some suspense when the bears come home, wondering if she'll get eaten, but it's not an edge of your seat sort of story. Like most fairy tales, the story that we tell and we read to our children is decidedly nicer than older versions. So it's also not an earth-shattering truth that every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But it's entirely possible to get pretty confused about where in the story you are. My bet is that Peter thought he was in the end of the story. Jesus came, taught some people, things are going pretty well, he's been up fishing all night, he's tired, the other guys are tired, and it's time to go home and try again tomorrow. It's the end of their day, the end of that story. And like most stories that end too soon, It's a little boring and unfulfilling. You see, getting confused about where we are in the story is actually incredibly unhelpful in the long run. If we confuse the middle of the story for the end, then Frodo never makes it to Mordor, maybe Gollum keeps the ring, Voldemort is never defeated, Aslan never takes reign, Anne never marries Gilbert, Robert Langdon never finds the Holy Grail, Andy Dufresne stays in jail, Jack and Rose are stuck in water, Forrest is still sitting on that bench waiting on a bus, and who knows where in the Republic that stopping in the middle might leave General Leia. It just so happens that when Peter obeys Jesus, that's the pivot point for the rest of the story. When Peter saw the catch is right smack in the middle of the story. We've already spent a couple weeks in the first part, and we're going to spend next week in the end of the story. And for this week, we'll hang out in the middle, the messy middle, where the story starts to shift and make some sense, maybe more or less sense, depending on your view of things. I do think of this story as akin to the story of Doubting Thomas. When Jesus appears to the disciples after his resurrection, Thomas isn't with them. John tells us this story, and we usually read it on the Sunday after Resurrection Sunday. As the disciples are talking about seeing the resurrected Lord, Thomas is the one who says he will not believe in the resurrection until he sees and touches for himself Jesus and the wounds of crucifixion. Peter is living a little in that same doubt. He obeys, he does the thing, but this moment when he sees the catch, becomes his moment of believing. Last week, we went a little more Thomas, echoing the words that are found in that story. Blessed are those who believe but have not seen. This week, we look differently. And we say, trust in what is to come. If you're worried you're at the end of a story you weren't done with yet, then you can choose to act and believe that you're in the middle of the story. You never know what might come next. Again, I'm pretty sure Peter just wanted to go home and see his wife and kids and get some sleep before starting again. At least for that day, the work seemed done. It might sound very simple, but this is one of the big deal things we talk about with our faith. A promise of resurrection believes that we were wrong about where the end of the story is. The story of resurrection means the disciples were wrong, the guards were wrong, the women who came to dress the body were wrong. They thought they were at the end of something, and instead they all ended up smack in the middle of God's story. And as easy as it is to wring our hands and worry about the impending end without considering we might actually be smack in the middle, we want to believe, we want to behave as if we're smack in the middle. What if we greeted spaces that feel scary and feel like the end as actually spaces full of possibility? What if we greeted those spaces with Billy Mays level enthusiasm? Wait, there's more. All right. So you all know me well enough to know that I'm more likely to punch someone with that level of enthusiasm than to think it's a good thing. But I do think it is worth pushing ourselves to see endings instead as a middle. You've heard me talk before about the improv comedy notion of yes and. For improv comedy to work, everyone has to be on board with what one person says or does. They not only say yes to whatever has been thrown out, they really go in for it. Yes, and. So if someone says, I'm a fish in an improv skit, you don't abandon them. You say yes, and I'm an aquarium keeper. Then someone else says yes, and I'm headed to visit an aquarium. And then someone else could say yes, and I'm looking for a tasty seafood dinner. The only chance that the whole scenario has is the willingness of everyone there to say yes and. I know full well that both the building sale conversations and me leaving feel like an end. The truth is, there was a chalice before there was a building and before I was here. As much as it feels like an end, you are smack in a hard middle, but a middle nonetheless. The future can be shaped by yes and. Yes, Chalice has a building we can't afford that's not new information. That's been the reality for a long time. Yes, we have a building we can't afford, and we can see a way out of the problem. Yes, there's a building we can't afford, and we have time to figure out a solution. Yes, pastoral ministry is coming to an end, but there's a chance for new dreams. Yes. Yes, and. Yes, and is the answer of knowing it's the middle of the story, not the end. Yes, and is the answer of hope. Yes, and is the answer of Peter, who threw out his nets that one more time and saw so much more than he ever imagined. Keep hoping so that you may see as clearly as Peter did. Amen.